What does it really mean to be an all-round musician? Well, what skills do you need to develop and how can you learn easily? These skills are important for all of us. Well, Music Matters YouTube sensation, educator Gareth Green has got all the answers. And after 35 years of music examining with ABRSM and working on the BBC, on radio, on television, experience on the international concert platform, a published composer and arranger, pianist and organist. Oh my goodness, Gareth Green, is there anything you haven't done? Not
only plenty. Hello, nice to be with you, Glory.
Oh, well, thank you, because not only has he done a lot, but he's also passionate about developing the all-round musician, and I'm so excited you're here. I'm Glory St. Germain from Ultimate Music Theory, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have Gareth Green as my special guest today in the Ultimate Music interview. So welcome, Gareth.
Thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Well, thank you. Now, I originally came across your amazing videos on the Music Matters YouTube channel, and I found your videos to be really fun and engaging. And as a fellow educator and YouTube channel producer, and of course, online creator myself, I really deeply appreciate how you really focus and explain things clearly and logically. So I just wanted to say congratulations on your success, Gareth.
Oh, well, that's really kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you ever think when you started out that you would be this YouTube sensation and that education on YouTube would be so powerful?
No, not really. I mean, we set out on this project just to see where it would go, really. But it's fascinating where it has gone. And there are so many wonderful things about it. And for me, one of the wonderful things as well is that we're giving access to music education to people who otherwise would not have access. And I'm really kind of deeply moved by some of the stuff we get from people in the third world, saying that they look forward to our video every Thursday because this is their only means of connecting with music education. I never imagined that would be part of the original vision for it, but isn't that wonderful that that's something that we're able to contribute?
Yes, that's fantastic. So Gareth, let's go back a few years. How did you get started in learning music?
Okay, yeah, you're going back a lot of years now, but my father was a professional musician, so something that I possibly didn't appreciate fully when I was a kid was having a professional musician in the house. So we used to talk music all the time. My father taught me music, and that was just terrific. And at a very early stage, in fact, my earliest memory actually is sitting on an organ bench watching my father play, and I must have been absolutely tiny. And when I was 11, I think it was, I played the organ for my first church service. I remember, it seemed like a breeze to me, but I remember my dad sitting there absolutely terrified. I think he was terrified, even if I wasn't. But that was the kind of start of the whole church organ thing for me. And it wasn't long before I was playing the organ regularly in church, and obviously taking piano lessons and moving things forwards.
Wow. And what were the musical skills that you developed as a pianist and organist that have served you well in your career now?
Yeah, and again, it's something that one looks back on and realizes the value of with hindsight, really, because a lot of people take piano lessons, don't they, and they learn pieces and they kind of move forwards. But I was doing all sorts of things, really, particularly with the church organ stuff, because you start off thinking you've just got to turn up and play some hymns. Before you know it, you're having to improvise, and you're having to accompany the choir, and you're having to start making little tweaks to the music and getting into arranging. And all of this kind of lays musical foundations that later you realize the value of, and just become part of the embodiment of being a musician. So that's kind of where it all started, as well as lots of other things, you know, accompanying people at a young age and playing piano for dance classes, you know, all sorts of different musical skills that you suddenly realize, you know, you can't go to a dance class and not play with a pulse. You have to learn to do that. What a great way to learn to do that. So yeah, lots of different kind of formative experiences, I suppose. Yeah.
And what a fun thing to do, to be able to not only be playing, you know, music and an instrument that you love, but to kind of be checking out the dancers as you're playing.
Well, there is that, I suppose, yeah. I have to be careful what I say, but my wife isn't far away, you know.
Well, to give our viewers a little more background on your work, Gareth, you have received scholarships at the Royal College of Music, Oxford University, and St. Paul's Cathedral, and I'm sure this really gave you fantastic opportunities to learn, from the best musicians and scholars and teachers, and what a wonderful opportunity to have worked, obviously, Director of Music, congratulations, at the Queen Elizabeth Grammar School, to really develop and continue to develop all of your amazing teaching skills. So how did that experience really influence your work?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I can remember going to St. Paul's Cathedral. I was 18. I was playing a little church organ somewhere, and suddenly I'm faced with this huge instrument in this huge cathedral, and you suddenly have to up your game. And you're working with some of the best people in the business, and there's little me at 18 thinking, wow, you're just there in awe of it. You learn so much from observing other people at work. Some of the finest organists in the world, some of the finest choir directors. You pick up the trade so quickly, and then you have to get up there, you have to play, you have to direct. It's a baptism of fire, but wow, what a way to push forwards. And I think that's been critical for me. And then you take all of that experience into other settings, and you work with professionals, you work with amateurs, and you find different ways to make it buzz.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you said that. My husband, before we, came on to do the interview, I was sharing with you that he's a professional vocalist, and we have 5 children, all musicians as well. And he used to always tell them, always make sure you play with people that are better than you are, that will challenge you, so that when they ask you to take the solo, you're like, what?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really challenging, and it does make us rise. So those are wonderful opportunities. So can you tell us a little bit about, your various aspects of your freelance musical life? Because you've got that part of it out there as well. What about that?
Yeah, well, once I'd finished my studies, I kind of went into the world of cathedral music in the UK, which of course, there's a particular tradition of all of that here, and then got involved with this school teaching that you've already mentioned, and kind of fell into being the director of music at the school at quite a young age. It was a funny story, how that just sort of came to be, really, and loved it. But when I got into my 30s, thought, hang on a minute, is this really what I want to do forever? And I think I really wanted to be a freelance musician. So loved the school, but moved forwards, slightly brave move, giving up all the security of all of that, but have not regretted it. So lots of playing, lots of conducting, composing, all sorts of things. Becoming an examiner for ABRSM, such as you've already mentioned that, and adjudicating music festivals, the work I did for BBC Religious Broadcasting, lots of different angles. And I've always enjoyed kind of the variety of all of that, really, and how one area kind of interacts with another. Fantastic.
Yeah. Wow. And now, you're still wearing a lot of hats right now. And how significant is the teaching aspect in your life?
Yeah, I've taught ever since I was 14. I think I had my first pupils. I don't know what kind of teacher I was back then, but we'll pass over that. But the skills develop, don't they, with everything else? And as they often say, you don't really learn your trade until you have to teach it to someone else. And then you learn an awful lot, because things that you've taken for granted, you suddenly think, okay, so this person doesn't get this. How do I put this over? So you find a way to put it over, and then you find it works for one person, doesn't work for another person. So you've got to have a whole load of kind of different approaches. For me, I've always loved the teaching, and really, in terms of kind of the percentage of my life spent doing this, that, and the other, I'm probably doing more teaching now than I've ever done before, actually. But absolutely loving what I do. And over the years, I've taught everybody from the age of 4 to the age of 94. These days, I tend to work with more advanced students, pianists, organists, people wanting to do their harmony and their theory, a lot of composers on as well. So again, a huge variety. And as you know, with this whole online world, it now means that there are people all over the world learning, and that's terrific. And it gives you a whole international dimension of the thing.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
You mentioned you started teaching at 14. You got me a little bit. I started teaching when I was 16, and I often thought I should probably give them their money back, because at at Sweet 16, to be really honest, Gareth, I wanted to buy a car, and I did. I bought a sports car, but I had to, make the car payments, and my mom said, well, you want to do it, and you've got this level of piano, you obviously can go ahead and teach. So my first students, but you learn so much. Like, if you truly want to understand something, teach it. And that has opens a whole new Pandora's box of tips and tricks you need, for sure. I think now more than ever, we really are having to teach and learn online, and some of the resources are so amazing. Why I was, BC, before computers is when I was born.
Yeah.
And
Join the club.
Yeah, and so right now I think people have just an opportunity like has never been available before. All the resources are amazing. And tell us about the variety of students and the topics that you're teaching now online.
Yeah, okay. Well, as I say, I've got people who are doing their piano studies and their organ studies, sometimes particular aspects of it as well, which is also very interesting. People come on looking for help with particular issues.
Yeah.
And, that's a fascinating dimension to it. But I'm finding as well, working with a lot of composers, and terrific that there are people out there, some of them with professional backgrounds, but a lot of very keen amateurs as well, who are desperate to advance their own composition skills. And that's something we can do so easily online. And particularly, sometimes you get people who say, well, I've got to travel 100 miles to find a teacher from where I live, and they can just come on and do it here. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So yeah, the variety just diversifies as we go, I find.
Absolutely.
Great.
And I think when first of all, music matters. And I love the name of that. How did Music Matters, and it truly, truly does. How did Music Matters begin, and who do you work with on all of your Music Matters projects?
Sure. Well, to go back to the start of it, we traveled back to 2003. Mm-hmm. And I was working with a colleague at the time, a chap called Dr. Andrew Padmore, as well-known choral conducting. And we set up this idea of putting on residential choral weekends. And then we moved on from there to doing kind of live day courses in theory, music appreciation. We did a few music appreciation weekends, all that kind of stuff. And my wife used to help enormously doing all the practicalities, because it's not just the music when you do that stuff. You've got to think about food and who's going to sleep where and all that kind of stuff. Big job. And so as the years went by, the whole thing kind of progressed in a new direction. And we've gradually moved it to have this online focus, which has taken it in a different direction. But in a sense, some of the original spirit of those day courses and so on lives on. But in a new way, as you say, we were born BC, but here we are using the tech and absolutely embracing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with so many musicians, they want to learn and they want to collaborate with other musicians around the world. And now we actually have an opportunity to do that. And so with you, Gareth, what do you believe are maybe the advantages of learning, online learning for musicians and collaborating?
Yeah, well, this is something I've had to think a lot about, really, because probably like me, you learn things like your theory and your harmony essentially from a textbook.
Yeah.
And okay, fine, it worked for us. But actually, what strikes me about the online thing is it's not just one-dimensional. It's at least three-dimensional. Because you can put a video together on an aspect of harmony or theory, whatever it is. You can explain it. You can write it down. People can actually see you write it down there and then. And that makes a huge practical connection. And the most important thing is you can play it and they can hear it. You don't hear things from a textbook.
That's right.
And I can kind of remember reading things in textbooks, when you read 10 pages about, the Neapolitan chord or something, thinking, what on earth is this thing? And then maybe getting to the piano and thinking, okay, that's how it is. But I think this is a terrific advantage now that we can do that in that multi-dimensional sort of way.
Yeah.
Plus all the kind of practicalities, you can pause the video, you can rewind it, you can replay it as many times as you want to. We've got the keys lighting up on the screen, you can freeze it, you can go to your keyboard, you can think, okay, let's see if I can find those notes. Yeah. much more exciting and engaging way of learning, and it immediately makes the practical connection, which
Yes.
those dry old textbooks, actually, it was a struggle to do.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting you said that, Gareth, because I remember when I was, that young 16-year-old student, and I was probably the one thing that I was not enjoying was music theory. And it's because the books were dry, without anything that inspired me as a musician. And when I started teaching, and the more I started teaching, I realized, there must be a better way. As they say, I never set out to become, a theory expert, but because there was a need, I felt I need to help people. And so that's when I started writing, and 50 books later, I'm still writing and still realizing that this is helping musicians, and
Absolutely.
it's bringing it to life. And if you don't have those, ear training and sight reading skills, then and it's funny because I know I've watched your tutorials, that people, regardless of what you say, whether you say, oh, I don't need to study music theory, or I do, you are all, if you're a musician, you're playing two notes, it's an interval. You may not know what it is, but you still have to learn music theory. And we've talked a little bit about Music Matters. And can you tell us about your Music Matters Maestro program?
Okay, yeah, the Maestro program is quite interesting. It's a YouTube channel membership scheme, really. So we've got 3 levels of maestros. So you can come onto this if you want to, and there are all sorts of perks. You can get discounts off our online courses and so on. But the main thing perhaps is that we run a monthly live stream, and that's always designed to include a fair bit of teaching. And the level 3 Maestro program is really for musicians, whether they be composers or performers, to make submissions. So they can submit a recording of something they're playing, they can submit a score of something they're writing or an audio of it, and we spend the time working together as a community of musicians, looking at their submissions. And that's a fantastic thing to be able to do, to offer some feedback and some encouragement, and of course there's mutual support within the group, and that's fantastic. People are very encouraging about other people's work, and then people see things, they hear things, and they get in touch and say, I want to write a string quartet, or I want to write something that might be a film score. And so the whole thing kind of feeds itself. So that's a wonderful program, and it's great to see how that's shaping up, really.
Yes. And you must be really proud of that too, that you've really taken, as you and I are in the BC company, before computers, that you have embraced technology and used it as a tool for helping so many musicians and educators that would never have that opportunity to connect with you had you not taken Music Matters to YouTube and grown your channel like this. It's commendable. And I'm sure if they don't say thank you, I'll just say thank you on behalf of them.
Oh, well, that's kind of your glory, but let me be honest here. I am not Mr. Tech, and I've got this wonderful guy called Alex, and this is an interesting story, actually, because it's part of the evolution of Music Matters. But Alex came to me as a piano student for years, and he's half my age and much more tech savvy, and he's the one who really first suggested that we could perhaps do something like this, and I was amazingly fearful of the whole tech online thing. Alex is fantastic at it, so he does all of that stuff for me. I do the music, and he does all the clever stuff. But it's great to be part of it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I find it really remarkably interesting. You also offer a marking service, and as well as a virtual accompanist service. So can you just tell us, how does that work exactly?
Yeah, well, you see, this is quite interesting, because sometimes people will take on an online course or watch some videos, or maybe they're working towards an exam and they need to do some harmony, or they're doing some college course somewhere and struggling with some written aspects of things, and they just want some feedback on their work. So because people started asking for this, I thought let's make it a service that we offer. So for those who want to send that kind of work and have evaluative feedback, that's something that we offer. And quite a few people take us up on it. And then the accompanist thing is quite interesting, because if you're in the back of wherever you live and you play the trombone, but there's not a pianist for thousands of miles, what do you do? So people send me the scores and say, will you just give me the accompaniment for this? And at least they can work with that. And once you've kind of got an idea about their tempi and how they want to play things and so on, it's a useful thing. Probably not as good as having a live accompanist in the room, but at least people have got some idea what's going on around their own part. So that's, I think it's a critical thing that some people need. So we've offered that as well.
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, not only because you want to have access to it, but even some of my students who are vocal students, I don't teach voice, but they come to me for theory, and so sometimes they'll say, "Oh, my accompanist is busy, and I can't, practice." And so that is an essential tool, actually, that is, I'm sure, very valuable to those that need it. And I think I mentioned earlier, of course, about your amazing Music Matters YouTube channel, which is how I found you, with well over 60,000 subscribers. I mean, wow, that's incredible. And it just goes to show you how many musicians and educators are not only looking for information, but are loving your videos, right? And
yeah, which is lovely.
About your YouTube channel.
Sure, yes. Well, as you say, it seems to be growing very nicely, and that's fantastic. We put out a video every Thursday, so we're just adding to this whole bank of stuff out there, and it's fascinating to see how that has grown, really. And we get lots of feedback from people. Most of it's very positive. Occasionally you get somebody who's not quite sure what they're looking at, and maybe you've got some kind of strange question about it. That's how it is, that's fine. But most people seem to find it helpful. And of course, one thing we're able to do is just to see which are the most popular subjects. What is it that people are looking for? Yeah. And just to make sure we provide that. But we try to do things that are kind of across a wide range. So some of it is kind of fairly light-hearted stuff. Quizzes about composers, that kind of stuff. Some people quite like that kind of thing. We try to do some fairly basic material as well. So just so that if people do want to know where the notes are on the stave, well, there's a video that will tell them that. But a lot of what we're doing is, people wanting to know how to harmonize things and how to use chromatic chords. It's sort of that end of the operation that, in a sense, we have the most interest, which is interesting. But as you know, with all this stuff, isn't it fascinating, that you acquire your teaching skills in relation to the person you're teaching? Yes. Suddenly in this online world, you don't see your audience. So you don't really know, are you explaining this to somebody who's 5, 95, has English as a first language or not, has a heap of background, has no background? And I find that a fascinating challenge, actually, and trying through the stuff that we put out on a Thursday to address different possible audiences as part of that package. Yeah. That's very, very well said, Gareth. Yeah. And I think too that you're right, when you're doing online videos, and obviously I do them as well, you don't quite know. So you try to sort of cover a little bit of everything, which kind of perfectly leads me into my next question. Which is, in your experience, Gareth, what does it really mean at the top of the show? I said, what does it mean to be an all-round musician? So can you just give your thoughts onto, what does that really mean for you, an all-round musician? Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical, this. And, in all my years in the exam room, I've been fascinated, really. You get fantastic players who knock you off your feet and you think, wow, am I privileged to be here to hear this? You get other people who are struggling. You get people who play a piece and you think, are they actually playing this piece because it's unrecognizable? So you get everything. But actually the thing that's fascinated me the most about life in the exam room is how often you get people who can play 3 pieces really quite nicely. Yes. And then they can't play their scales, or they can't sight read, or the oral tests are a total disaster for them. And so this is the thing that engages me, really. Just why is that? How have those people learned those pieces to be able to play them at a reasonable level in some cases without the associated oral skills, for example? Yeah. How have they learnt those pieces if they have no sight reading skills? So they've probably spent months and months and months learning these pieces by rote. They probably absolutely hate them. They can't read it. don't really know what they're hearing. So, you know, they're not an all-round musician. They're slogging through this system, trying to pick up the next certificate. And actually, is that an engaging journey? I think it probably isn't. I remember one girl, you know, years ago, she did a piano exam and it was a bit sort of hit and miss, but we were kind of the right side of the line by the end. But as she walked out of the door, she picked up her piano book, and as she walked out, she tore it in half. And I thought it was a deeply symbolic movement. It's kind of like, I'm never going to play these pieces ever again. And you think, that is not what we're about.
No.
So you're not going to need to tear your book in half if you're an all-round musician. So I just think all these integrated skills are just so important.
Yeah.
And you probably have this as well. I have people that get in touch with me, you know, my trumpet teacher or my singing teacher or whatever's told me to get in touch. I've got an exam in 2 weeks' time, and the teacher says, can you do the oral tests? Well, you know, do the oral test. What does that mean? You know, it's not about doing the oral test, is it? It's about oral training and having an oral perception that sits alongside what you're playing. So, okay, we'll do the oral test and we'll see if we can help you to firefight, but that's not about the all-round musician. Yeah. So it kind of almost takes me right back to the beginning, you know, those skills, those formative skills that I learned, you know, things like improvisation. Mm-hmm. You know, when I had to sit at the organ because, you know, they were still taking a collection in church and you'd finish the hymn and you suddenly think, hey, I've got to play a few chords while they carry on doing this, and I hope it's not going to take long because I haven't got many chords, you know. But you gradually get better at it, and then you kind of think, actually, it's not about banging out a few chords. Can I actually make something that sounds like a piece of music? And you just gradually develop these skills, and then you take those skills forward because you have keyboard harmony skills. So you read a piece of music, you see the harmony, you understand the progressions, the whole theory thing connects. So it's an all-embracing thing. And I think one of our dangers is that we sort of do all these things in the education system we have, but they're kind of like separate channels. You know, you learn pieces, you learn scales, you do oral tests. And the all-round musician for me is all about actually how do we integrate all of those things?
Mm-hmm. And you know,
and that's what fires people up. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and what I really appreciate, you know, with what you're sharing right now, Gareth, is that you're talking about musicians and what skills we need to develop in order to be an all-round musician. But our viewers are also educators, and I think that it's really important for them to listen to what you're saying right now. I'm an educator, and already you are impacting me yet again. I always learn when I do these interviews that, you know, just to take a step back in your own teaching and say, okay, am I teaching to the, you know, all-round musician? Am I providing all the tools that they need so that when they do, if they choose to do an exam, which it's not just about exams, it's about being a musician. But am I providing them with all the skills so that they can grab a piece of music and say, oh, that's awesome, let me play that, and understand what they're reading, and that they can hear it. I remember going shopping with my mom one day, quick story, and she was reading a recipe book, and my mother was a great, you know, cook, chef, baker, whatever you wanted to call her. I, for one, I'm not in the kitchen a lot other than to eat, but anyway, so I was at the piano while she was in the kitchen. And I remember one day she opened up a cookbook and I was with her and she said, oh, I'm going to buy this cookbook and make this. It's just going to be delicious. And I kind of looked at her, you know, half a cup of this and, you know, 2 scoops of that. And I said, well, what are you talking about? How can you read a recipe and know what it's going to taste like? And I'll never forget this, Gareth, because she looked at me and she said, well, Glory, the same way that you open up a book when we go to the music store and you say, oh, I can't wait to learn this. This is a beautiful piece. You hear it by simply looking at the music, and I can taste it just by looking at the ingredients. So I thought, well, that's very interesting, you know, because we really do not only want to teach to or become that all-round musician, we want to be that educator as well. So just sort of in wrapping things up, Gareth, what skills do we need to develop, and how can we easily learn these skills?
Well, for me, it's about integration. And this is one of the wonderful things about the online thing, you know, what we were saying earlier about doing things in a multi-dimensional way. You know, we're not just reading theory from a textbook, but we're learning to write it, we're learning to hear it, we're learning to play it. that's going to integrate things. So how we pull all those skills together, do we teach someone to learn a piece by saying, this is how it goes, I'll play a few notes, you play them back to me. It's not imaginative, it's not musical. You can't just teach people by rote, so you need them to know those reading skills. Yeah. And I think, there's another dimension to this for me, apart from the kind of what are these separate segments that we need to draw together. Yeah. And I suppose essentially it's about the left and the right side of the brain. Because you'll have taught people, as I have, who have one side of the brain that functions really well. The sort of people who do mechanics, they learn notes, they learn fingers, they learn rhythms, and it's as musical as a brick wall. Mm-hmm. You get other people who are great on the other side of the brain, and they've got bags of imagination and enthusiasm, but they're not fussy about, are we playing the right notes, have we got the right fingers, have we got a steady pulse, all that stuff. And that's another piece for me of essential integration. It's not just about playing notes and rhythms accurately. What's the quality of your tone? Are you producing a beautiful sound? What are we doing with musical detail? Are we just observing it, or are we owning it? Are we able to go a bit further? What else do we need to do beyond the score? How do we really engage with that? What makes a performance? All these things. So for me, it's a huge agenda of integration. And when I'm teaching people individually, I'm looking for that all the time. Where are your strengths? Yeah. Where are the issues that are not quite firing on all cylinders? Let's get those going. Yeah. And you are onto this integrated path, being the all-round musician.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, I think that's at the center of it for me. Mm.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it really fun as an educator, if we continue to be really observant of our students' strengths and weaknesses, and then challenge ourselves as educators to fill the gap and to help them become the all-round musician. So in closing, what suggestions do you have for educators or musicians to help them move forward with their desire to become the all-round musician?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, actually. And like you, I spend a lot of my time working with teachers. And one of the things that I'm listening to a lot of the time is teachers expressing their own fears. Things like, what happens when a student comes along and says, can you play this piece? And I'm sitting there as a teacher thinking, no, I haven't got the reading skills. I can't do that. So it's the same agenda, isn't it? In order to be able to teach this stuff, you've got to have the skills yourself, And I find myself quite often working with perfectly accomplished players, and often people have got plenty of teaching experience, just taking a step back and saying, we're going to do some keyboard harmony. Okay, can you harmonize Happy Birthday to You? Can you harmonize A Christmas Carol? And often they look at me in complete fear and trepidation, but we get that stuff going. And actually the whole thing moves on. So it's an empowering thing for teachers as well, just to make sure we've got all those skills buzzing. And it's something that has been lacking in their own musical education, that they're usually absolutely delighted to plug. Yeah. And it's interesting, even back in the exam system, and as you rightly say, there's much more to being a musician than the exam system. But, it's interesting, you get people in a diploma exam who can play the stuff, the repertoire, all up to scratch. Can't deal with the sight reading.
Yes.
Can't deal with a viva. Can't tell you what's going on in a sonata form structure or where the second subject begins. You ask a question, tell me why you slowed down in bar 18. Answer, because my teacher told me to. It's not a good answer. And that flags up something for me about teaching, and it's something I talk to teachers about, really. What is our responsibility as a teacher? It's almost to do ourselves out of a job, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's to take people on a journey from dependence to independence. So the person who's going to come along and say, I did that because my teacher told me to, is not an independent learner.
That's true.
It doesn't do many favors.
I just have to share with you, it's so funny. You're making me smile, Gareth, because I remember my teacher, I did my ARCT, the Royal Conservatory Associate Teacher's Diploma. And when I was done that, and received my diploma, and I remember her saying to me, and now the lessons begin. Yeah. Because you have to be at that level in order to now grow and learn how to teach at that level. It's a whole different ballgame, Well, So much fun listening to your wonderful words of wisdom today. You inspired me. I got a little spring in my step. What's the best way to connect with you and learn more about Music Matters videos and your course trainings, Gareth?
Okay, well, obviously Music Matters has a YouTube channel that you've mentioned, so a search to Music Matters will take you there very quickly. We've obviously got a website as well, so that's www.mcourses.co.uk. So if anybody wants to go on there and see what there is, be my guest.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gareth, for sharing your insights into how we can become all-round musicians, but also as educators, how we can help our students become all-round musicians. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. It's been an absolute delight for me. Thank you.
Well, it's been great. Thank you very much for having me, Gloria. Lovely to spend some time with you.
Absolutely.
And good luck with everything you're doing as well. It's fantastic to see.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Remember to join our Ultimate Music Theory Facebook group where you can connect with Gareth Green and other expert musicians, and also subscribe to our Ultimate Music Theory YouTube channel. We release new videos every week, and remember to click the little notification button. I think it's right up here somewhere. So you will be notified with each new video released, such as this one. So take care, and thanks for joining me, Gareth, and till next time, teach with passion.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.